Good evening, social change warriors. Welcome back. It's really great to be back with you again on another Wednesday of our Angry Bitch Club. The Angry Bees are back to buzz. We have a lot to talk about tonight, and we will hopefully be having a guest join us tonight. And we're going to go over some of the other cases that we've been covering on the ladies that we've been honoring during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So welcome, and welcome to all our new viewers. We're really glad to have you. If you ever have any questions about our show, our movement, please give me a direct message on Twitter. I would be happy to chat with you about any questions that you have. And if you have any missing persons cases involving domestic violence or any other type of gripe or bitch that you would like to share with us on Wednesdays, or have us bring it to the forefront for you, we're happy to do it. So please let me know. I am actually in Madison, Wisconsin again, and thank you to all of you that contacted me about the hurricane. And my house is getting there. Still some work to be done in the backyard, but I am grateful for the fact that everyone in my neighborhood did not sustain any injuries. And it was all to property, to their houses and our backyard. So we are grateful for that, and so sorry for everyone that has lost a loved one in the horrific hurricanes that have been just imploding in the South this year during hurricane season. So I wanted to just remind you of our logos in case you see us on social media. If you could share us out with your friends, colleagues, family members, I would greatly appreciate it. Thursday nights, we have Calling Out Corruption, where we're talking about lots of corruption that's going on in the country right now. Every week, I seem to find a new community that's dealing with government or police corruption. It's depressing. This last week has been rough on me because I have come up with about 3 new cases to share with you in the next 3 weeks. And it just seems like it's never going to end. So please keep an eye out for Calling Out Corruption on Thursday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern, unless otherwise noted. Sometimes we might go earlier. We might change days if we have a guest that needs us to do that. So I'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow night's show at the end of the hour, and also next week's show. We have some great guests coming up for you. If you see this lovely silhouette of this lovely woman with all of the women, that's our Angry Bitch Club logo. So keep an eye open for that for our Wednesday shows that you're part of tonight. And of course, our Social Change Warriors is our mothership. And this is our Social Change Warriors logo that has been with me for the past 5 years since I originally created it and started Social Change Warriors. So we're just happy to be with you and see you again, and have you see me and I see you hopefully in the chat box. If not, you'll see me on replay and send me some questions. Unfortunately, our dear Amber Kay is not with us tonight. She is not feeling well, so we will miss her tonight. She will not be able to make it, but hopefully tomorrow night, or if not, for sure next week. And we hope nothing but the best for her and hope she feels better soon. She is an amazing addition to Social Change Warriors. I have tentatively given her the name Lieutenant. I think I told you all last week that we were trying to come up with the name for our Social Change Warrior, Amber, and all the great help she is to me. And I think we're going with Lieutenant, unless she vetoes that, or if someone comes up with a better name for her, we'll go with Lieutenant for now. So welcome, Kathy, to the show tonight. It's so good to see you. Kathy is my dear friend since I was 21. We've been sister friends forever and ever. And I'll tell you a little bit about our experience that we had together this week. It was really great experience for 2 friends to have. So anyway, let's just move on through. We are waiting for our guest. I'm not exactly sure when she's going to be able to join us. Hopefully she'll join us tonight. She's a very busy lady. If not tonight, then possibly at the top of the hour tomorrow, before we get going with our guest for tomorrow, we may be able to have her on tomorrow. But we're hoping she's going to find her way into the studio tonight. She is an amazing person, Carol Ann Peterson. She has her PhD in domestic violence counseling, and she is an expert of experts. She has testified in court cases. She has worked in domestic violence shelters. She has helped with rehoming domestic violence victims. She's an expert on strangulation, which is not a great subject to be an expert on. It's very stressful. I know she's battled with compassion fatigue. She's also a survivor herself. So I'm excited for you all to meet her and hear her expertise and background that she has on domestic violence. And I'll let you know when she makes it into the studio, and we will bring her right up. Just wanted to mention everything that was going on with the hurricanes again. Like I did last week, if you even have a spare dollar and you want to send it to South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, all the areas that were impacted by the hurricanes, every little bit helps. You know, it's all about being a village. So if the whole village sends $1, we have a lot of dollars. It's not about you having to give up your coffee break for the week or your groceries. You know, nobody's asking you to do that. It's tough times for everybody, and we need our money for our own budgets. But when people ask you to help, you try to remember it's really not about the totality of just one person giving. It's about the totality of many people giving. And I know that so many are still suffering and missing, that we have so many missing people. Unfortunately, I believe the last count was well over 500 are still missing. And that might not be accurate because I have not been on the news in the last 2 days. I've been prepping for this and attending the rally yesterday here in Madison for the vice president, her presidential run. So I will definitely check into that for you and let you know tomorrow night what those numbers look like. But anything helps, and everybody's been through so much. So Mother Nature can be very difficult. I just shared these pictures last week, and I wanted to show you again. This was my neighborhood. I live part-time in Madison, part-time in Daytona Beach area, and this was my neighborhood. We were flooded in for about 2.5 days, a little bit less than the last time, but it was still rough, and my son was out in the kayak, and the neighbor kids were out in their little John boat. That's how we were getting around to help each other out from house to house. So it was pretty insane. We were out of power, but again, like I said, no life lost on my street, no injuries, just property and housing, furniture, such like that. So everybody's doing their best to build back up. Just love to see my favorite pelican. I love the pelicans when I'm in Florida. They bring me joy. And then the northern lights here in Wisconsin were all my friends were sending me photos of them while I was back in Florida for 3 weeks, and they were beautiful this year. I saw them once in my life many years ago. I was way up north in Boulder Junction, Wisconsin, and I got to see the northern lights, and they were fantastic. If you ever get a chance to see them, try to make it happen, because it's spectacular. It makes you feel like it just can't be real. This can't really be a live thing happening in front of me, but they're very real. So if you ever get a chance to see them, please do. So I got to take my glasses off now so I can kind of read along here with you. Before we kind of get into the meat of the show tonight, the honoring domestic violence victims and talking about Domestic Violence Awareness Month, this came up this week in the news, and it was in the media quite a bit about, let me see if I can move this over here so you can see that a little better. Sorry guys, I always forget how to remove this tag. Once I do it, I forget how to remove it. So I'll work on that, because my tech isn't always the greatest yet. I'm still learning live stream, still learning StreamYard. So I'm trying to figure out, let me just post one small dot here and see if we can make that happen. And then I'll put that up so you can see the photos better. Well, that didn't help either, did it? I still can't not able to remove. There we go. That helped. Ruby Bridges. Wow, what a courageous child. For those of you that don't know about her, this was in 1960 when they were administering some IQ tests to children because they were trying to, the Brown versus Board of Education, and they were trying to get African-American students into, at the time, what were all white schools, which still completely blows my mind and just makes me so mad. I can barely talk that was even happening in just 1960. I mean, I was born in 63. So, and many of my friends are older than me and were alive when this was going on. So she had a very high IQ. And so she was in this test group of children that were going to be segregated into the white schools. And she literally had to have FBI agents escorting her into school. Oh, there's my girl. There's Carol Ann. I'm going to bring her on the platform. And it's going to be great to see her again. Hi, Carol Ann.
Hello. It just took me forever. It wouldn't let me in.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so glad you're in. I should have I gave you my phone number, but if that ever happens again when we're together live, just call me, because I can.
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, shoot, my phone didn't ring. Well, what the heck? I'm sorry, but I was just about to check LinkedIn to see if you were doing okay. So welcome.
What I had to do was just type it out directly. It just wouldn't cut and paste, nothing. I mean, nothing was cooperating.
Oh, don't you love technology, right? We
Yeah.
use it. We need it. We need it for this, and we need it for so much, especially in your line of work when you're being a professor and giving all your keynote speeches. We need technology.
Yeah.
Well, it's fantastic to see you again.
Good to see you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just going to put up, I made a slide for you so we can talk a little bit about your background and let the social change warriors know what you're all about. So let me go back there for a second. Hang on. Let's see here. I've got to do a couple buttons so I can bring the show up. So I'm just going to move back. I was just doing a little bit of my intro while I was waiting for you. There you are. All right. So Carol Ann, I gave them a little bit of your background when I introduced you just a few minutes ago, but do you want to just share with everybody? Well, first of all, everyone, I met Carol Ann when I decided to go back to get my master's degree at USC in my 50s. And she was one of my professors at USC, and I was working on one of my final projects, my senior, what you would consider a senior year. It was my last semester of grad school. And she was kind enough to help me with the project. I did a live webinar, something I'd never done before. And it was really fantastic. And the subject we were talking about wasn't fantastic. It was about homelessness and domestic violence. And it was very deep and rough and dark. But Carol Ann, you have such a kind heart, and you just do such a wonderful job of explaining what you do in this line of work and how you help victims of domestic violence. So I'm so happy I got to meet you back then. So let our social change warriors and our guests know a little bit about what you do and how you got started in this very difficult field.
I've been doing this for 35 plus years. This is never what I intended to do. But at the time, I was a lobbyist in Sacramento for California Federation of Business and Professional Women. And we were doing the first spousal rape bill in the country. And I had never told my story. Nobody knew that I was a survivor. And so it came time to have witnesses. And at the time, Lucille Roybal Allard was in the state legislature, now in Congress. I think she's about to retire, unfortunately. So I said, well, can your sponsor actually be your witness? And there was this hesitation. And anybody who knows Lucille knows that the next words I'm saying that she said to me is not typical of her. But she said, this doesn't happen to people like you. And I knew what it was as I caught her off guard. It was like, oh my gosh, seriously. So telling my story for the very first time publicly in front of a Senate committee. And we had a legislator who said, I'm really sorry that happens to you, but I don't believe a husband rapes a wife. And I thought, he didn't say that to me. And we had one other person, Pat Towner at the time, who was the executive director of the California State Commission on the Status of Women, and had the same story. And we kind of looked at each other, and I said, Senator, with all due respect, I don't think we understood what you said, because I couldn't believe he really said that. And he repeated it. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. And at that time, Diane Watson was in the state legislature, and Diane was an amazing person. And she immediately read the signs and she went, move the bill, because she knew I was starting to get angry. You don't get angry when you're a lobbyist and working with legislators. But I walked out of there and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe somebody said that to us. So I called the Los Angeles County Domestic Violence Council and said, what do you do? And at that time, Carol Arnett, who's now a lifelong friend, said, well, we have multiple committees, we do trainings, and we work on legislation, and we just do anything and everything that we have to do in Los Angeles County. And so she asked what I did, and I said, I'm a lobbyist. And she said, well, we just formed a legislative committee, want a chair? And I thought, seriously? So fortunately for me, I got to do that for 6 years, working with the Los Angeles County Board, and literally working on legislation that pertained to LA County in particular, but also for the field of domestic violence and victims in California. But it led me down the path to eventually work at the University of Southern California in the School of Social Work, where I actually created the course for the School of Social Work on domestic violence, but had the good fortune of being there over 17 years and not only teaching domestic violence, but leadership and diversity and policy and advocacy and global violence against women. And so all of it just was everything that I had ever done in my career. These days, I'm doing independent consulting work. So I'm being an expert witness for victims in court, as well as doing training. I've continued to do training for shelter staff, training for law enforcement. At one time, I was a trainer for the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. The acronym most of you might know from NCIS is FLETC. And also, I've been fortunate the last year being an expert a member of the expert advisory group for domesticshelters.org. And as of a few days ago, I'm now a member of the public policy committee for NOVA. And for those who don't know who that is, it's the National Organization for Victim Advocacy. So starting to kind of come full circle and back to doing legislation, which I realize I've kind of missed.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Your career is so well-rounded and it's just so important. I respect you so much for everything that you've done for victims and survivors of domestic violence. And I am so sorry you had to listen to someone say that to you while you're lobbying in government, and that someone would have, the scary thing is that someone would have that opinion of a woman in any day and age, much less in this, in the last 20, 30 years, that we're property. So we decide to get married and accept someone's proposal of marriage and become someone's wife, and they become our husband, but then we're property. So whenever they want to have sex with us, they can just do that whenever they want. And if we say no, that doesn't matter because we married them.
That was his opinion, is that you consented to be in that bed when you got married.
Wow. And oh man, I wish you could tell me which state he was from, because I'll go and hold up a sign. I'll go do my protest.
Oh, you don't have to protest. He was from California. Former chief of police for LAPD, Ed Davis. Ed is now passed away. But yeah, that was his bottom line, is that if you consented to be in that bed, whatever happened, happened.
Wow. So he was a police officer.
Mm-hmm. Chief of police, no less, for LAPD.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if you remember that I was a police officer here in Wisconsin. And as I've been starting this live streaming, I've been covering victims of domestic violence, and some of them have been victims of police officer violence. Their husband, boyfriend, or their significant other was law enforcement and committed the crime. So I did not know that there was an acronym for that now.
Yes.
The fact that it's so prevalent that now we have an acronym for an officer who kills his wife.
Yes. And for your listeners and viewers, it's OIDV, Officer Involved Domestic Violence. And what we're beginning to see, which is really scary, is both being officers in a marriage or relationship. In fact, gentleman on LinkedIn that I've now connected with, Bruce Bieber, whose daughter was law enforcement, married to law enforcement, and was murdered by her husband. And so, and there's been a couple of stories recently that have also cropped up on LinkedIn. So we're kind of seeing that it's going just beyond even just an officer who kills a spouse. It's two officers who are living together, and one of them has decided to literally kill the other. So it's something that we've not talked about, something we need to talk about, because the bigger issue is that if you're committing domestic violence at home and you are a police officer, how do I trust you to do your job out in the street?
Oh my gosh. Yes, exactly. And we just keep hearing so much of this. And, I ran across some characters in my career at my department, at local departments, that would give me like the vibe. And, as a woman, when you get the vibe that this man is misogynist, and you get the vibe that he's one of those do as I say, not as I do kind of people, and you can, it's visceral. I mean, I worked with some guys I had zero respect for, because it was just this visceral, I'm 100% positive, my gut feeling's right, that this person does not respect women, believes that they are in total charge. Most of them didn't believe women should be in law enforcement, didn't
Right.
want women on the force in the first place. And they're still out there. There's no doubt in my mind that they're still out there.
But I think we want your audience to know that they're a small percentage of law enforcement, because there are some officers, Mark Wynn and Bob Martin, that I have known for decades, who are the person I want protecting me, and I would not hesitate to have them protect my life. They're the officers you want in your community. They're the officers who get it, understand it, would never commit it, and will hold other officers accountable. But both of them are now retired, but still we need to have, somebody hold them accountable. Mark Wynn does a lot of talking around the country and training law enforcement officers to be better officers, because he grew up as a child of abuse. His father was law enforcement, abused his mother. And interestingly enough, he and his brothers are all in law enforcement. But they're still the ones you want out on the street. They're the ones you want in the community, because they understand it. And so we want to make sure that the audience knows it's a small percentage. So don't paint every officer with the same brush.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. And usually at the beginning of every one of my shows, because my shows are covering on Thursdays, especially, are covering police corruption and government corruption. And I always make sure everyone knows that we are highlighting a small percentage, but they are out there, and we have to get rid of them. We have to stand up and raise our voice and find a way. If we have to protest in front of City Hall or in front of the police department, because there has been either some information that has come out or evidence that has come out that a law enforcement officer is committing a crime or has committed a crime, as a community, we can't sit back anymore and just wait for internal investigations and wait for them maybe to not get fired, or maybe they get fired, but they still stay on the register of law enforcement officers. So they move to another city or they move to another county. And this happens all the time. So yes, even though the percentage is small, and I'm still absolutely in the belief that police officers, most of them are good humans, and they want to take the oath to protect and serve because it's a calling, and they want to be part of their communities and watch over their communities. I believe that number is bigger, but I am alarmed at how many cases we have had in this last year in our country. And I keep finding more every week. So we have to call out, as they say in the movies, the dirty cops. And we have to call out the corrupt criminals that are in government, because they're in our communities. They live among us. They're our neighbors, and they do not deserve to be in office, or they don't deserve any job. In my opinion, they should all be in jail for the multitude of crimes that most of them have committed, but they get away with a lot of it because there's no evidence to convict them. Prosecutors will not take a case to court if they don't feel 90% that they're going to convict. So we have a lot of these perpetrators that just get away with it, and that's really quite depressing. So,
but it's also judges. We need to hold judges accountable who give light sentences. It's a first offense, so I'm really not going to come down on you. But it goes back to what Casey Gwen said when he was a city attorney in San Diego. If you prosecute to the fullest extent of the law the misdemeanor, you're going to reduce the felonies. And that's what we don't see happening. We don't see that misdemeanor being held to the highest standard. And so if I break your wrist and you tell me, oh, just pay a fine of $50, I think what I did is okay. It was no big deal, obviously, because the judge didn't really fine me or hold me accountable. Right. And so we need to make sure judges get that training, that they're really doing their job. So every piece of this system, including shelter staff, including, those of us as advocates who are doing laws and legislation, need to be held accountable that we're doing the best we can, because victims depend on us. And if we're not doing our jobs at every stage, somebody dies. And that's the bigger issue that we always have to remember, is that somebody dies. I never will forget, and I don't know who told me this when I was with the LA County Domestic Violence Council. We have to treat every domestic violence case as a potential homicide.
Absolutely.
That is where I got so scared. I thought, my gosh, I really need to speak for victims who have no voice.
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad you have chosen to do that. I'm just going to bring the deck up for a minute. I want to finish my introduction, and I'll get your opinion on some of the things that were in the news this week that I'm bringing up as part of our intro before we get into my questions that I have for you tonight on some cases that I've been following. So let me skip through my intro. So I was just beginning to talk about the dear girl that was in the news this week again because of all the book banning that's gone on in Florida. And I'm planning to do a show on a Thursday night calling out corruption on what's been going on with Republicans in Florida, the Florida governor, DeSantis, and all of the crazy book bannings and removing history from schools because it's just not okay with me. And oops, I lost my deck. I must have lost my connection to it.
Well, and you can kind of look at the race in North Carolina, because if you don't know, I have now moved to North Carolina. I'm in Greensboro.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yes, a year ago. So look at the governor's race in North Carolina, which is really interesting, about night and day of who believes women should be property and who shouldn't. So
right. Okay, I guess I might have lost the deck to that, but I was talking about Ruby Bridges, who was in, the Brown versus Board of Education, and they did that whole test where they were testing IQs, and she was one that had a high IQ, so she was segregated into the white school and the all white school in 1960. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around that was even happening in 1960. I wasn't born till 63, so it still completely blows my mind that this was happening, and that this little child who was 6 years old had to be escorted into school by FBI agents because the crowds, and this is just a picture, it didn't really come out too great, but I have it on my Twitter account for those of you that want to go pull that up and read the story, read the history about it. And especially if you're in Florida right now and you can't find a book that has anything to do with the civil rights movement, let me know, because I'll make sure you get one. I'm going to cover this in full in a couple of weeks on Thursday night. I have guests lined up for this Thursday and next Thursday. So in 2 weeks, I'm going to cover what's going on in Florida with the book banning. I find that to be incredibly corrupt, and I'm not happy at all about the government in Florida right now for what they're doing to silence Black history. And it's just incredibly wrong on everything.
It also goes to the fact that I want to control what you think.
Right.
Because if you're so afraid that I can't read Mark Twain, if I can't read the Diary of Anne Frank, what you're saying is you don't want me not only not to learn history, but that I don't have the ability to think for myself and make decisions.
Exactly. It's a form of oppression, and it's just utterly insane that in 2024 that this is even happening. So I will definitely be covering that as much as I can, as much info as I can collect, and I'm going to try to find a guest to come on in 2 weeks if you're interested in that at all. That's what we're going to be talking about. So we are still in Domestic Violence Awareness Month for the next about week and a half. And so I just wanted to, the last 3 shows, we've just been covering victims of domestic violence and talking about ways that we can prevent domestic violence, because according to the experts, and I'm going to rely on Carolyn to help me out here, it can be prevented. If it's caught soon enough, it can be prevented. So if you think about what she just said about how every domestic violence case needs to be treated as a potential homicide, because if it goes long enough, that's what will happen. And I saw something interesting, Carol-Ann, last week. A gentleman was being interviewed, and he said that he asked the question of a young man in his 20s or 30s, and he said to him, "Who do you think is the most dangerous person that a woman is ever going to meet?" And he sat there for a while, and he put his head down, and he was like, "Oh gosh, I don't know. It could be so many." And I'm sure he's thinking a stranger, or right, somebody who's, a kid, somebody who could kidnap her, or so there was some silence, and then he just kind of shook his head, and the gentleman said, "It's her husband."
Mm-hmm.
And that is really terrifying to think of, that it's your husband. is the most dangerous person that you're probably ever going to have in your life.
Yeah, it goes back to Gavin DeBecker's book, The Gift of Fear. So if your audience has not read it, you need to read it. An amazing book. But Gavin makes a statement in there that men are afraid women will laugh at them. Women are afraid men will kill them. It's probably one of the most powerful statements I've ever read. And that is true, because our safety depends on us and making sure of our surroundings and who's around us. And usually that potential is going to be somebody who's male.
Yeah. Yep. It's pretty terrifying. So I shared a few. I know statistics can be kind of overwhelming for people, and it's not meant to in any way, take away from the overall grief of the family and the person who actually dies of domestic violence, because that's very individual. Every single family suffers when their loved one has been taken in a domestic violence case, because the children are affected. The whole family on both sides are affected, the husband's side, the wife's side, or if they're not married, the whole family has been working together. They've been, a family for holidays and birthdays. And then all of a sudden, maybe they didn't know, because most women do not tell their families that their husband has been abusing them. And sometimes it escalates very quickly. Other times it can go on for years and years. But every 9 seconds, a woman is beaten. That's a terrifying statistic that we could sit here, Carol Ann, and count 9 seconds, and another woman has just been punched in the face, punched in the stomach, worse in many cases. And what we have to do, we have to prevent that. We have to find a way to, if we see any signs, and this was actually the gentleman that video I was talking about. It's hard to see on here, but I will post it on my Twitter account, so all of you can click on this and watch it. It's very interesting the way he asked the questions of this young man, because My Life Mattered is the hashtag I've been using, because every single woman that is murdered by her partner, her boyfriend, or ex-husband, her life mattered. And she's not a statistic. She was a human being who had a job and a family and kids and friends and aspirations for the future. And she's now gone because she didn't get along with her husband, because they didn't always see eye to eye. I mean, we have to stop this. We have to find a way to catch this early, whether it be through counseling, or a friend or a family is feeling that something's wrong, but they're afraid to get involved. What do you think, Caroline, what are the ways that we can prevent this?
Well, it goes back to Ellen Pence, and Ellen believed in community policing, that it's a community issue. In fact, Jackson Katz also says this is not a women's issue. This is a community issue. This is, an entire country's issue, that it's a man's issue, that men need to also stand up and take account for being silent.
Right.
As many of you know, Jackson Katz is not silent. I love Jackson dearly. In fact, we did a piece for a nonprofit a couple of months ago in Chicago, and we got to talk about even how the media portrays this.
Yes.
In fact, there was a news article recently, and a woman was severely beaten, and the police chief of that area said, well, at least she didn't die. And I'm going, what? What do you mean she didn't die? Can you talk about the fact that this happened in general? We need to give neighbors permission to feel okay in calling 911. I understand if you don't want, and I understand if you don't want to intervene, because it can be dangerous, but simply picking up the phone and calling 911. And smaller towns, it's much harder. So if you're living in very rural areas, it's much more difficult, because everybody knows everybody. But we've got to find ways for people to feel comfortable in making these reports, letting victims know they're not alone, that there is somebody there who is willing to help. And so until we can do that, we're going to continuously, unfortunately, have victims who perish. I don't know if you've been seeing on LinkedIn, but every so often out of Australia, they're posting, and every time another woman dies because of domestic violence, the last count I saw in this year alone, they've had 64 women who have been murdered. So
in Australia.
So this isn't just us. This is global. I got contacts with colleagues in even Canada, Lynn Bibo is working on how to have law enforcement be better trained in talking to victims, kind of letting victims tell their story without interrupting them 14 times. So, it's those small little steps that we don't hear about, but those are the small little steps that we need. The ability of everybody to come together somehow collectively to really do this work. Yes. And make it safe for everybody to be able to report this. Are we ever going to stop it? Probably not, because human beings are human beings. And unfortunately, some human beings are just not born with a conscience. I don't know why there's something that goes wrong when they're born, but
in the womb, obviously it goes wrong in the womb for some of the worst, right? Like for severe malignant narcissism and is it sociopath or is psychopath and sociopath, are they considered?
Yeah, there are different. I always have to go back and look up the definition to remember the difference. But it's not just that. Sometimes people are just born wired differently and may not have even been subjected to violence in the womb. Right. That's the other piece, down the road, totally different topic that we have to figure out. Why are some people born wired differently?
Right.
But it's that lack of empathy and sympathy and that narcissistic attitude of me first that you need to look for. You need to pay attention. Look at those subtle signs of your neighbors. And we do need to give everybody the ability to feel safe enough to intervene in one way or another, even if it's just a call to 911. So until we make this a community issue and not make it a women's issue, no offense to the feminist movement that I was part of, but we need to stop making this a feminist issue. It really, truly is a community issue.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And that was so well said. And I've been taking a few notes as you're sharing all this with us. So the chat box goes away when the live ends. So when we have a lot of replay, so I like to pop up in the screen with us, because that way people are able to see what you have to say, and if they want to take a screenshot of it or write it down so they can share it with a family member or a friend. So that's why I'm doing my little note taking as we go here. So let me pop up the deck here one more time and go on. I want to show you a few more statistics to run by you and share with you. Well, first of all, let me raise our screen back up here. There we go. So these three ladies, Caroline, are cases I've been following for several years now, before I started live streaming, when I was still doing pre-recordeds. And I honor them at the end of every show because of the circumstances of their death, which isn't unlike a lot of other women that have died before them and are going to die after them in the next 3 to 4 days. Because like you said, domestic violence is not going away, and we're never going to completely be able to eradicate it. All we can do is our best to save one person at a time. Like you said, giving neighbors permission to call 911, friends and family permission to say, you know what, I don't feel right about this. Something's not right about her. We don't hear from her enough. We don't see her enough. She's not driving anymore. Why did she quit her job? There's so many things we could go on about, and you and I will get to that in a few minutes, the signs and symptoms of what domestic violence looks like from the outside in. So the female homicides, this is a 2018 study, Caroline, 92% of victims were killed by a man they knew, and 63 were killed by current husbands, boyfriends, or ex-husbands. That's a really scary, ridiculous amount. And the three ladies that I have pictured here, Suzanne Morphew has her hand on her head. Her case is still unsolved. They just recently found her body. She was missing, and you may know about that case. That's out of Colorado. Ellen Greenberg, her case goes back to 2011. It is still currently ruled a suicide. There's no way in HE double hockey sticks that Ellen Greenberg unlived herself. She was stabbed 20 times. Absolutely no way that happened. And it's a huge government corruption police cover up that I'm involved researching. And we're going to keep sharing out Ellen's story because her parents are fighting for that case to be overturned. They hired an independent medical examiner who said there's no way that she could have stabbed herself 20 times and lived even through half of those stab wounds for the knife to still be stuck. The final blow was in her chest. So that means she stabbed herself 19 times. And these corrupt police officers and corrupt government in Pennsylvania expects us to believe this. They think we're all stupid, that we don't have a brain, that we're not smart enough to understand that there's no way that could happen. Same with Sandra Birchmore, the young woman on the bottom. That's out of Massachusetts, Carol Ann. And her death, she was framed for her own unliving by a police officer who had groomed her from the age of 13 as a explorer, as a police explorer, and slept with her in had sex with her in various ways in his car, wherever they could go for many, many years, and basically was like her handler, for lack of a better way to put it. He had her so mentally confused and not able to think for herself. And he was basically her handler. And she was having, I'm supposed to be saying sex, which I find ridiculous. I don't know why grown adults cannot talk like grown adults on these YouTube channels and other channels, but so I don't want to get kicked off. So many of the officers in the Stoughton Police Department were having sex with Sandra Birchmore. That is an absolute proven fact already. Many have come forward, and she wrote in her diary about it. So her family found her diary. So for almost 2 years, her death was ruled a suicide, an unliving, as I'm supposed to say now. That obviously didn't happen. And many of us that followed her case, we knew there's no way that happened because of her diary coming out several years ago and her being able, to tell her story of what happened to her. So she was pregnant, told this police officer, Matthew Farwell, yes, Matthew, I'm going to say your name because you are a horrible individual. You should have never been a police officer, and you deserve, I hope the jury finds everything that they need to find to put you in jail for the rest of your miserable life. So you're going to jail, Matthew, and I'm so grateful for that. And I can't wait for the rest of them to get arrested, because what they were doing, grooming young girls and abusing them, is one of the most horrific crimes of all crimes, because people trust the police. And like you were saying a few minutes ago, Caroline, how are we supposed to trust the police when we see these type of atrocities happening to these young girls in our communities? And there's 4 out there right now, Caroline, that I haven't even covered yet because I need time to do the research. 4 more cases currently that have come to light of police explorer programs, and also police officers who are abusing young girls, police school officers, school resource officers. And I'll be covering all those in the next few weeks for those of you that are interested. So these are the 3 cases, all involving domestic violence, because even though Sandra Birchmore wasn't married to Matthew Farwell, she was, in her eyes, dating him, and he was having sex with her at her house or in his squad car or wherever he could. They were in a domestic situation, correct?
Yeah. Well, it comes up more in terms of when you've got somebody like Sandra who's been involved with the police, whether from being an explorer, whether being a new rookie in a law enforcement agency, where there's much more contact. They're much more in talking to each other, involved with each other in one way or another, whether they're partners or otherwise. Right. And that's what happened. But you also got what we're beginning to see more and more is staged suicides. And it's happening from just the average narcissist who's killing their victim and making it look like a suicide, that somehow they killed themselves. And so we're seeing that these are becoming staged. There's a case, and I've forgotten her last name, and I'm in contact with her mother on LinkedIn, Noelle, who same thing. The police did a staged suicide of her. And we know from all the ways of how this was staged, it was not a suicide, but she had the same thing. She was an informant for the police because she made a deal with one of the officers in particular that, she wouldn't get a jail sentence and if she was doing all these other things, and it's also resulted in her death. And so, whether it's from law enforcement or whether it's from just the average intimate partner, we're seeing a lot more staged suicides. And that's the other thing. We need to have people, law enforcement, forensics, DAs, whatever, understand what is a staged suicide? What is it you need to look for that makes this different?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolute suicide. And I think that training is far behind. Alliance for Hope International, Casey Gwen, and Gail Strack have been working on that, and they've got some cases that they're looking at.
What is
What
that
you're
called,
finding-
Caroline? I'm going to type that in our chat box for the audience.
Alliance for Hope International.
Alliance, okay.
And they're an umbrella organization. They help create the family justice centers. They've got a family justice legal aspect. They've now taken on domesticshelters.org, which they get over 1 million hits a year of people looking for resources. So if you need to know where your shelter's at, just type in your zip code or a city and state, and they'll show you every agency around.
Oh, wow.
But one of the things, they also have the Training Institute on Strangulation, which I was fortunate enough to take the 4.5-day course to understand strangulation, what it looks like, what it means.
That cannot be easy for you. That I was talking about compassion fatigue right before you came up, that someone that's been in your career, everything that you've seen and been through, you have to have had experienced that. So a 4-day course on strangulation, that cannot be easy on you.
It's not. But they were really good. We got a lot of breaks, and even though they were pushing us hard from 8 to 5, but it was still the fact of understanding, what does that look like? What does it mean? And now when you look at stage suicides, where they're doing the same thing, we're staging, that, oh, she hung herself. Well, did she really hang herself? What does that look like? How are the ligature marks done? And so Alliance for Hope International, as I said, they're working on several unsolved cases. What they're finding, and a lot of us are finding, is not getting access to the forensic results from the coroner. There's not a full coroner autopsy that is done, or all the evidence isn't being sent over from law enforcement. So you've got these gaps that mean we can't go any further. In fact, for Noelle, with her mother, Bridget, not able to get the autopsy results, not able to get any of the case files. She has been stalled at every stage along the way.
Wow.
And we know literally that this was a staged suicide, that she did not commit suicide, partly because of the way she was tied around the tree. I don't know how many of us can tie ourselves around a tree. But little things of that nature. And so we're just seeing this more and more, that, there's a lot of cover-ups from anybody committing these homicides. And we have to really have trained professionals know and what it is, what it looks like, and the ability to push back at the government to get the information that's needed. If I can't get an autopsy report and I'm a family member, what does that say? Why are you not giving me what I'm entitled to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I type her name in the chat box?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to quickly look her up on LinkedIn because we're connected all the time. I have tons of stuff from her mom.
Is she okay? Do you think she'd be okay with me sharing that with my audience, or should we wait to ask her?
She let me share it when I did the videotaping with Jackson Katz. She gave me permission at that time.
Okay.
If I can find Bridget's name here, but she posts something every day about Noelle.
How did she spell? Do you know how Noelle is spelled? Is it Noelle? Noelle. And what was her last name?
That's what I'm looking at. I'm trying to look that up for you.
Thank you. I will be happy to, get my ducks in a row here, do my research, and add her to one of our Wednesday night sessions. If we can help her mom to get what she needs, happy to do it.
Yeah. Her name is Bridget with 1 T, Walsh, and it's WALSH. And she's now using a new last name. So I don't know if she's gotten married or just decided to use it, but it's ISHKU, N is in Nancy, T is in Tom, N is in Nancy, A.
Make sure I got this right. ISHKUNTA. I missed a letter.
TANA.
N-A. Okay. And Bridget is BRIDGETTE.
No, just 1 T, no E on the end. BRIGET.
Oh, I got it. Okay. Whoops. Now I just lost the A there. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay. 1 T and then the E, and no E, you said? Oh, that's right. Bridget. Got it. And Noelle was her last name Welsh as well?
I think so. I don't see Noelle's last name listed, but Bridget will post something every single day about Noelle.
So
Whether it's
Noelle was murdered by her, we believe her boyfriend.
no, we believe she was murdered by law enforcement.
Oh boy. Okay.
She
So
was also an informant.
oh, that's right. Murdered by law enforcement. Got it. Okay. Yep. I thought the officer was her boyfriend.
And Bridget's also trying to get something called Noelle's Law passed. I'm trying to recall if I think there might be in Arizona.
I was just going to say, what state are we in for this?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, I'll do the research on that though, but I've got this much I've got. So we're going to, I'm going to do the research and look into that. I'll let you know if I have any questions, and I'll let you know. Maybe her mom would like to come on our live stream.
She probably would.
I would love to have her and love to meet her. And I'm just so sorry for her. Just an absolute tragedy.
In looking at this, she does list the same last name as Bridget. I don't want to mispronounce it, but Katana.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll correct that then. Okay. Yeah, I'll correct that when I start working on the research, and I'll let you know in the next week or two if I need any help, and if to reach out to her. I would really love to have her on as a guest, and if there's anything we can do to motivate the state, that if it's Arizona or whatever state they're in, to help motivate them and to spread the word. I have colleagues everywhere in this country. That's the greatest thing about going to USC, Carol Ann. I now have colleagues who are social workers and have gone into the different, the array of jobs in social work is mind-boggling how many there are. It's just social workers everywhere. Most people don't even realize that we're doing the job of social work, but I'm doing social work tonight. You're doing social work tonight. It's everywhere in every shape or form. You can be a journalism social worker, a police. Now a lot of police departments are employing social workers. They're just everywhere. It's not, the stereotype of the social worker takes kids away from bad families and puts them in foster care. That was your typical, idea of what people thought social workers did. But, social workers are in schools, they're in companies, they work as, therapists. Between the two of us, we could name off 10 different occupations that involve a master's degree in social work. It's just one of the most varied educations. So people, if you're thinking of going back to school and you don't know what to do with yourself, or if you're young and you're watching this and you want, help or advice, get a hold of me or get a hold of Carol Ann, and we'll help you, because it's a very honorable profession. It's a meaningful profession. You'll never regret that you got involved in social work in whatever capacity, because there's so many hats that you can wear. You won't be pigeonholed into just one kind of a job. Now, if you want to work for Department of Social Services and you want to help children and remove them from violent homes and get them into a safe foster care, then do that. That's a very necessary form of social work, but it's just not the only one.
Right. Yeah. Well, and two, one of the things when I first started to work at USC, everybody kept saying Trojan family. And I thought, nice tagline, but USC probably is one of the very few universities where the alumni connection is absolute paramount and absolute amazing. If you walk in someplace and say you went to USC and there's an alum there, they are going to sit down and talk to you. They are going to help you. They are going to be there for you. Right. It really, truly is a Trojan family. Right. And, after my first year at the university, I went, this isn't a tagline. They really mean this. And so it's not often you find your alumni associations that well connected.
Oh yeah, it's been fantastic for me, and I made so many connections and networks with just amazing people doing good works everywhere in our country. So the next thing I kind of was informing my audience about a little bit last week are some of the some of what you can see happening in domestic violence and how that occurs. And I'm going to exit this out because for some reason it's not. There we go, letting me see it all. So we've got throwing objects. So just because, someone doesn't hit you, it doesn't mean that they might not in the future, or that they're kind of rubbing up to it. So these are some of the signs you might see: pushing you, kicking at you, pulling your chair out, or causing you to fall, pushing you into a wall, purposely making you lose your balance, just slapping you, but not drawing blood, not leaving any marks. Obviously, then we move up to the scary physical abuse of strangling, hitting, beating, threatening you with a weapon or the use of a weapon. And then your psychological abuse is equally as bad, my viewers. It's a different kind of abuse. It causes what I used to say when I was working at the domestic violence shelters. It's bruising from within. So when you're constantly put down, you're called names, you're told you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're too fat, you're too thin, you're not a good cook, you're not a good mom. It just goes on. And this is mostly daily. Some abusers will take a break. They'll like maybe be too busy with their own narcissistic self, having things going on with themselves. So they may lay off you for a couple days. It's kind of a game they play with themselves. They lead you into this like, oh my God, maybe he's not going to do this week, or maybe he won't hit me this week or call me names this week. But they're just messing with you. They're messing with your mind. They know exactly what they're going to do. They know when they're going to hit you again. They know that when they're going to disparage you again. So both of these, whether you're being punched and hit and you're showing physical signs of abuse, or it's all black eye on the inside, these are very scary signs that this person is escalating. Is that your take on this as well, Carol Ann?
It is. And in fact, one of the terms we're now using is coercive control, because judges and juries don't always get psychological abuse quite the same way. And so we've been using coercive control. Not every state has it in their laws. So look and see if your state has it. The last I knew, I think there's only maybe about 12 to 15 states, maybe 20 that have the term. But it's also the fact that, keep in mind, everything an abuser does is planned. So when you see the news, oh, he snapped. He didn't snap. He really intentionally knew exactly what he was going to do. That so-called explosion stage is planned. They know what they do. In fact, I was on a panel once with two recovering abusers or reformed abusers, played for the Denver Broncos. And they clearly stated, we knew what we did every time we did it, and we chose to be violent. So keep in mind, this is a choice. They're not violent usually with their boss. They're not violent usually with the neighbors. They're only violent with an intimate partner. That's a choice. So that's one of the things when, oh, they're, greatest dad in the world, most wonderful neighbor we could ever have, doesn't mean that's who they are behind closed doors. They may be, and they may not be. So just remember, though, the violence that they create is by choice.
Absolutely. And it's scary because it's when we're talking about prevention. So most of the men that I have met that I ended up finding out that they had been violent with their former partners or with their former wife, were the guy at work that everybody thought was the best guy. He was popular, could have been the boss, could have been a supervisor. They come up, like you said, best neighbor on the block. Oh, Gary's the greatest. And then when it all comes out that Gary's wife is dead, or she's now being taken to the hospital and he's arrested for domestic violence, and everyone's like, no way, Gary would never do that. That can't be Gary, because they do not show themselves as monsters. They hide all that. They have this ability to put a mask on and be anyone that they want to be, because that's what malignant narcissists, that's what they do. That's what they're wired to do. They're wired to self-serve. They're wired to put themselves first. And like you were saying earlier, Caroline, they have absolutely zero empathy and zero sympathy.
Yeah.
It's a scary, scary, toxic combination of a persona. Yeah. Because everybody thinks they're great, except for the woman who's being kicked and beaten and punched and called names and told she's horrible. And then who does she get to believe her when everybody in her world thinks that this guy is the greatest guy ever?
Well, and also too, this is where we have to hold the news media accountable. I get so tired of hearing it was a domestic dispute. It was not a domestic dispute. This was domestic violence. This was coercive control. This is somebody who thought they had the right to control somebody else. And so when you tell me it's a domestic dispute, to me that says, oh, couple next door was fighting, and it's not how it got loud and the neighbors, called the cops. It's not a dispute. It is absolute out and out violence, whether it's psychological, coercive, or physical. It is still violence. It's why I changed the name of the course before I left USC from domestic violence to domestic and intimate partner abuse, because violence gives the connotation that it's always something that's physical, and it's not. It's so subtle from really quote unquote great abusers of doing what they do, that it's very quiet, it's very subtle. And you begin to question, your sanity. So it's how you get the term gaslighting out of the 1940 movies, where literally he would, and it went back to the era when you had gas lamps, and he would slowly dim the lights, and she'd think, am I crazy? And then the lights would come back up, and she'd think, I must be crazy. And nobody was around to see it. Nobody was around to know. So she was left to her own devices, but it's what abusers do. Oh, that's not what I said to you. I didn't say that to you at all. And, you're making up stories again. Why are you going, why are you so reactive? You're so emotional. Because I'm not sure I'm not crazy, because of how they set up every scenario that happens. So occasionally, the news media gets it right. And when they do, I applaud them to no end. Occasionally you get TV shows who get it right. And that's the other. If you're watching TV shows and there's domestic violence, pay attention how it's portrayed. Yes. Sometimes they'll get it right, and sometimes it's kind of glossed over. And you have to be really careful, because you'll kind of get sucked in. I was watching a political ad here in North Carolina, and they said, oh, Kamala Harris wants, this, for transgender, operations and jails, and, and they want these people with our girls in athletics. And I'm going, the women in athletics going to the Olympics are women. Could you not use the term girls?
Exactly.
So it's that subtlety that we overlook, that we have to pay attention to, because words matter. And our children are listening.
Absolutely. And this campaign of any campaign has been just insane with the lies, just lies coming out of, I'm sorry. If you're a Republican, I apologize, because I have a lot of friends who are Republicans, independents, Democrats. Some choose to be not, they don't want a label. They just want to vote policy. But what we're dealing with right now is something we've never seen before. I mean, the fact checks that are going on a daily basis of what's coming out of the Republican camp it's constant lies. And I'm sorry for you if that's your candidate, because you have to do better. Get a better candidate next time. Go to the primary, vote for a better candidate, because the one you have right now is not a good person, and the lies are constant.
Well, and I'm going to chastise both parties, because one of the things that I always despise when you have a campaign ad is things are taken out of context. You get this little snippet. Well, was that the whole statement? Was that the whole speech? So that's why I do my best anymore not to listen to political ads, because things are taken out of context. And so, whoever you decide
to vote for, it's on both sides of the aisle. I absolutely agree. There's lies going on both sides. There's deceptive. Now, deceptive ads, in my opinion, should be absolutely illegal. You should not be able to put up an ad that is taken.
I agree. Unfortunately, we're going to have to get Federal Communications Commission to work on that one. But my
that'll be a biggie.
But whoever you vote for them in your own good conscience, because you really think they're the best candidate. But look at your issues and compare their issues to what you believe in and what you want in your government. I just prefer to have somebody who believes that women are equal. Women have the right to, make decisions for themselves. We're not 5-year-old children where somebody needs to dictate how to make a decision. But vote for who you believe is the best candidate. And, and if that's your choice, whether I agree with it or not, it's your choice.
Right. And we will have to agree to disagree from now until eternity, because there'll always be, and I hope there'll be a third party someday. I hope there'll be a third party that wants to work more towards compromise, give people more of an option of who to vote for. I think our country has come to the point where a third party,
but I think what it comes down,
and term limits for Congress and Senate.
If you're going to do term limits, Congress isn't going to do it. So you're going to have to find somebody who's willing to do an amendment to the Constitution, which means lots and lots of money. But the other is also the fact that you have to sort of, look and see, when you say third party, there's third parties, there's fourth parties, fifth parties. They're not given equal time on the stage to talk about the issues. They're not questioned.
Right.
And so all of those extra candidates that are on your ballot, you don't know who they are because they don't get a say. And so if we want to be more open and inclusive, we need to let the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, whatever other party is out there, to have an equal say on the stage about the issues. Because in 2016, I actually voted for Gary Johnson from the Libertarian Party. I heard him do a town hall meeting. Somebody asked him a question about substance abuse. Unfortunately, she had lost her son to substance abuse. And he looked at her and realized she wasn't sure about his answer. And he said, "Did I answer your question?" And she said, "No." And so he redid his answer. And he didn't use the same words. He really changed the answer in a better format and said, "Did that answer it?" And she said, "Yes." And I thought, you were willing to take the time to listen to this lady and know you didn't answer her question and found a way of answering it. And that to me was what I want in a leader. That's what I want. Somebody who's willing to have. John Kennedy had people around him who were not yes people. They were people who told him the truth, whether he liked it or not. And so that's also what you want. You want a leader who is going to tell you what you need to know in terms of reality to make the best decisions. And, one of those best decisions is I want a leader who takes domestic violence seriously, who really looks at this issue and understands that, in particular, women are dying. And, unfortunately, marginalized communities such as the LGBT community gets left out and shoved aside as well. And they're deserving of the same protections. So that's what I want. I want a candidate who takes these issues very seriously and is willing to do something about it instead of just giving me lip service.
I love that. And I love that, you're being an informed voter. You're taking the time to go to a town hall. You're taking the time to understand the issues that are important to you. What is your ideology? What policies do you want to see in law? What laws do you want to see canned because they're terrible or they need to be revisited? And that makes you an informed voter. And that's what we need in this country. We need more people interested in. I always say, people say, "I don't want to talk about politics. I don't like politics." Well, what does politics? What does that mean to you? That's just a word. Politics is everything, because we cannot have a just society without some form of government, without laws, without some protections for environmental protections and protections for climate control and protections for people and justice, so that we're not sending people to jail or executing people that didn't do it because you screwed up in the trial and you didn't have the correct lawyer for that person, or maybe the evidence was very skewed or planted. So we have to have laws. We have to have some form of organization within government. So that's politics, and you don't have to love it, but everybody needs to care about it a little bit because you're a member of society, right?
Well, and I think people forget back when John Kennedy was actually elected president, everybody, looks at like Kennedy, big landslide, in terms of voting. Wow, this is really amazing. When the dust settled, what they discovered was if one voter in every precinct in the country changed their vote, you would have had Nixon sooner. You wouldn't have had John Kennedy. You would have had Nixon. And the same thing happened in 1984 with Mondale Ferraro. If two people in every precinct in the country changed their vote, we would have had Mondale Ferraro in the White House. And so when you think that one vote doesn't matter, it really does. For your audience, and you may not know, my background is that was my major. I was a political science major. And so I'm always looking
I didn't know that.
After the election's over and the dust settles, what do those statistics really look like? What is the breakdown? And so for those two elections, to realize that you could have been that one vote in a precinct that changed an election. And if you scale it down to local, if my one vote makes a change, I could have changed the mayor. I could have changed the governor. I could have changed my state senator. Huge difference of what happens. So it's why you need to be an informed voter. Read everything on your ballot, even if it drives you crazy. We have a constitutional amendment here in North Carolina, and it said that they wanted to change the law so that people, U.S. citizens who were 18 and older could vote. And I thought there's something, they've had 18-year-olds voting in North Carolina. I thought I'm missing something. There's a word in there, only U.S. citizens who are 18 years or older can vote. And what they were doing is, the background was that they didn't want to have cities in North Carolina, such as like San Francisco, and I'm trying to think where else, I think possibly New York, a number of cities where those cities have been able to say, if you are a legal alien in our city, you can vote. And in those cities, it says legal. So you've got documentation that you're here legally, and they're allowing them to vote. North Carolina is saying, we don't want you to do that. And so I had to go look it up, because I thought, there's something about this constitutional amendment that I'm not sure about. That's why you need to read things on your ballot. That's why you need to look at the candidate, so that you're voting for the candidate that matches your views. As has been said, I might not agree with your candidate or who you're voting for. I just want to know that you made an informed decision to vote for that candidate.
Yes, absolutely. That's it. It's so well said, Caroline. An informed decision. I had no idea that you majored in political science. That's so interesting to know. So I'm just going to pop our screen back up here and take us to the next area that I want to chat with you about. So this was something that I had put on my Twitter X account, that again, honoring these three ladies that I've been following their cases, that it really does have to do with means, motive, and opportunity. And you hear that if you watch crime shows, if you watch trial coverage, you hear that all the time. But you guys, you have to have those three in order to convict someone. And most husbands and partners, which is why that other man, the man that was in that video, and now I wish I could think of his name. I'll put it on my, make a post about it. The most dangerous person in a woman's life is her husband, because they have means, they have motive, and they have opportunity. They have all three of those. And in these three lovely ladies' cases, their husband or partner, in Ellen's case, fiance, in Suzanne's case, husband, and in Sandra Birchmore's case, partner, because they had been together since she was 13 in one way, shape, or form. They all had means, motive, and opportunity. So it's a big thing when we're looking at domestic violence. So I'm just going to slide through here, because we're going to have to do a whole nother episode on Ellen Pence and the power and control wheel, and because I want to highlight her, because she was an amazing person. So I'm just going to slide through the slides that I covered last week, because there's so much. So we tried to do 3 weeks worth, but I talked a little bit last week about the different programs that we have now for domestic violence housing. And I'm going to share all this information on my website, so that ladies can find it if they're interested in looking into any of these really amazing centers across the country, and how you can find one in your own town. I'll put that together in a pamphlet and put that on my website. So we are at the point where we talked a little bit about prevention earlier, but prevention is key. And if you had any, what is your knowledge, since you've been in government, you're a political science major? Tell us a little bit about the Violence Against Women Act.
Violence Against Women Act was created in 1994 by then Senator Joe Biden. This has been a lifelong issue for him. And what it really started out was very small, that we wanted to do programs that would not only be prevention, but provide services for victims of violence. And one of the things early on was even safe campuses, so you had better lighting. And so it started out really, with minimal amount. It has been renewed pretty much every 5 years, but we've added to it over the years. A couple of years ago, we added to provide funding for services and training for the LGBTQ community. We included the fact that tribes can now arrest somebody who's a non-tribal member who commits an act of violence on the reservation, which didn't happen before. They had to wait for either the federal marshals or local law enforcement to come arrest. They couldn't do it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and then it's also the fact that we're providing services in rural areas, looking more about what does housing mean. So every year we've added to it, we've expanded it, we've made it more and more. But it's not just the Violence Against Women Act. We're also right now in a crisis that it's very possible that the Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA, may have 40% of its funding cut.
Oh,
And for
no.
those who don't know, victims of crime is not just domestic violence, sexual assault. It's anyone who has had a violent crime committed against them. It provides coverage of counseling services. It covers a lot of the medical procedures that somebody might need that happened to them because of the crime. This is going to sound a little bit gruesome, but if God forbid you have a family member who was murdered in your home, they'll provide all the funding for a cleanup crew. You don't have to do this. And so it provides even moving expenses. And for victims of violence, that's important. If I can get out of where I live to get to another place, as we all know, it's hard for all of us, even with jobs and good incomes, to provide the security deposit and the first and last month's rent. So
you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. If you find an apartment for $1,200 and you have to do first, last security, that's over $5,000.
Right.
Not many people have that just lying around, and especially if the violence has escalated and they're trying to make a plan to get out as fast as they can, they're just not going to have that money. Exactly.
Yeah. And so one of the things we're really actively doing is making sure people call their congressperson to say, don't cut the funding. This is too important. There are, people's lives on the line. And as I said, it's not just domestic violence and sexual assault. It's anybody who's a victim of a crime. And so we want to make sure that funding keeps going, because it does fund. Some of that money goes to domestic violence shelters. Some of that goes to hotlines. Some of that goes to, increasing better medical technology. So if you're going into emergency, I want the best stuff in that emergency room that you could possibly give me if I need it. So VOCA is huge right now that we're looking at. But yeah, the Violence Against Women Act is something that really has been there to provide funding and resources, and the ability to have victims know that there's something available to them. Looking more these days under VAWA for rural communities. One of my favorites is, think about if I live in Alaska and I live 400 miles from the nearest city, what do I do? How do I get services? How do I get help? So trying to figure out creative ways that in rural communities, how do we get you services and help so that you're not stranded and feeling very much alone? So this has been one of those, and it has the possibility of being cut. So VAWA could go away just as VOCA could go away. We had to fight very hard in 2018, should have been renewed about a year or two sooner, but 2018, because literally they wanted to cut it. It's been renewed again. The last I knew we're okay, but we're always in need of funding. And the worst part is, for those of you who don't know, anytime you want to balance a budget at local, state, or federal government, we cut social services. We don't look at the high end aspects of where we could, cut back. We look at those services that are at the bottom for humanity, basically. And so social services get cut first.
And that's just maddening. There's just no other way to say it. That's just maddening. And so how do we lobby? What do we do to make that different, right?
Pay attention. You might not like your legislator, but get on their email list, see what they vote for, see how they don't vote, send them letters. One of the things they'll never tell you in Congress or anywhere else is that if you make a phone call, you represent 50 people in their constituency, and you have to be from their constituency. So if you're going to call a legislator, if I called Joe Biden when he was in Congress, I'm not a constituent. He's going to go, well, that was nice, but you don't represent my constituents.
Right.
A phone call represents 50 constituents. A form letter, we've all been at those letter writing parties and we sign our names. Form letter represents approximately 100 constituents. If you write a personal letter with your personal story, you represent 300 constituents. that is so valuable because, yeah, to a great degree, they're going to vote party line, but they're also going to look and see how many people called, sent a letter, made the effort to tell them how they felt. And because they know you're the voter, you're the person who put them in office and can take them out of office.
Right.
And so on that basis, spend that time, even if you just make the phone call and say, please vote yes on AB 38 or whatever it may be.
Right.
Just so that they know that you're watching, you're listening, you're paying attention.
I love that. That's such wonderful advice for community members who want to get involved in politics, whether it be on the local level for something that's just a local law that's going to get passed in a state. Like, we're looking at the legalizing marijuana that's been going on for years now. And so that's on the ballot in a lot of states this year that legalize medical marijuana, but haven't come around to actually finally, let's just legalize this and be done with it once and for all. As you can tell what my opinion is on that. Let's just get that done. The amount of arrests that went on in my short career as law enforcement that had to do with marijuana, that wasted my time and wasted everybody else's time when we could have been doing so many other things, is ridiculous. And so that has just got to happen. We've got to have it done and over with once and for all. And you made a comment about the money that was going into the campus programs for safe walking, because a lot of the ladies on campus are not always being careful. So we had a program at University of Wisconsin where I was an officer. We had Safe Walk. And so the volunteers would meet the person right at their library or their dorm or their class, and then walk them wherever they need to go. And then another safe walker would then meet them, because you're not going to put a safe walker in danger. So you're going to then they were met, taken to the next place, and then they would split off. So, I mean, it was a great program. They wore red polo shirts, and then in the winter they had big red coats on that said Safe Walk on the back. And these are the kind of programs that we need to see, on our in our universities and our campuses to protect the young ladies that are in school.
At one time, it's no longer on my phone, but USC had something called, if I recall, it was something like Save a Life. And it was an app on your phone, and you could just press the app. And if you had the ability, you could press 911 and it would open a line, and you didn't have to say anything. So they could hear the conversation. So if you felt you were in danger and couldn't say something, or it would go directly to campus security if you needed help. And so, that's what we need. But we also had campus security who would escort you to your car if need be, especially for students who were on campus late at night. So people don't realize that the Violence Against Women Act has a lot of components to it. It is providing that funding for the security on campuses so that you're not walking to your car at 9 o'clock at night after a class by yourself. It's providing, even in lower income communities, safer lighting, the ability to do our best to prevent violence from happening. But for me, prevention really starts at that 3-year-old, when you've got those two little kids who like each other, but they don't really want to know. They don't know what that really means, but they push each other and they kind of shove each other. That's where you stop it. Age appropriate. That's not how you treat people. And if you keep enforcing that lesson all the way along when they're 16, you're going to prevent some dating violence from happening, because they're going to remember not appropriate behavior. But if I stop it at 16, it's too late. They've already gotten the behavior. They've already learned it. They already think it's okay. And so we need to start when they're really very young and stop that behavior early.
Absolutely. That was the same message when I was an officer. I came up with a program called Tough Choices, and it was a 50-minute program that I presented to the high school students in the Madison area and in the state of Wisconsin about the dangers of drinking in high school. And, obviously the kids would snicker at me, and there'd be some talking, and sometimes they'd be talking while I'm talking because they really didn't care what I was saying. But once I got past, the heavy stuff, the medical, and started giving them examples of friends of theirs and other peers in other high schools in the state that had been killed in car accidents or had died of overdose of alcohol and gone into an alcoholic coma, it would get real quiet in the room. because suddenly they would realize, wait a minute, these are my kids my age. Wait a minute, I'm just partying. I'm just getting drunk. I'm having fun after the football game or after the basketball or hockey game. So that I was always telling the kids about, everything in moderation and how you have to be so careful with that. And it's like that for everything that we're trying to teach our kids. If we start younger, if I go to college and start trying to tell college kids not to drink too much and not to get drunk, they're not going to laugh me right out of the room. They're not going to even care. But if I start in the grade schools and the high schools, maybe even if I just get 2 kids to think about this, about how much, what alcohol actually is, that it's not candy, it's not Kool-Aid, it's poison that you're putting in your body. And so I would see their faces, and I actually would get letters later on down the road from kids that were growing up in college and saying, hey, thanks for that. I watch it. I don't drink that much. I'm really careful. I don't want to get drunk like that. And it's the same with violence. If what you allow is what is going to happen. So as parents, if you continue to allow your kids to do certain things that are not age appropriate, it's just going to escalate as they get older. And that it's just the case with alcohol, drugs, violence. They're all very similar in that way. So, well, I don't want to keep you too long. I could sit here and talk to you for hours and hours and hours, and I would love to have you back. But I want to end with a question about the case that I've been very glued to, which is the Sandra Birchmore case. I just want to bring up a photo of her. This case, all the ladies I've been covering since I started live streaming hurt my heart, but this one hurts my heart worse than any other because she was a child and she did not deserve to be groomed by police officers, the worst kind of tragedy. And then the disrespect to, she was pregnant with this man's baby who had been grooming her. And like I said, basically, guiding her in her entire life up to that point in ways that were wrong and evil. He murdered her, and then he had the audacity to make it look like she did it to herself. So what was done to her, Carol Ann, is that, in my opinion, this is nothing that's been proved yet. This is what is suspected, is that he strangled her and then made it look like she hung herself from the doorknob of the door with, I believe it was a scarf or something. You are an expert at strangulation, so that's why I wanted to ask you about this. What did the police miss? Because they were corrupt and involved in hiding this, or they had absolutely no clue what they were doing and assumed right off the bat that this young woman killed herself, unlived herself. And what could they have been looking for that possibly would have given that case to be right away have a murder suspect and be considered a homicide versus an unaliving?
Yeah, well, it's not just law enforcement, doing their job and
medical examiner.
Well, and that's the other, it's the coroner as well.
Yes.
Because what you want to look for is the ligature marks. They pull up in a certain way if you're hanging yourself versus if somebody else is hanging you, and how you're being hung. And so there's a lot of complications. And so even if law enforcement may have missed some of the signs, they should have shown up with the coroner. And so you really want to know, what did the coroner's report have to say? And how did they come to the conclusion that they came to? So without having the coroner's report and seeing the investigative reports from officers, we don't have a complete picture. And so that makes it really difficult for us to come to any conclusion. All we can do is speculate, figuring like the young woman who was stabbed 20 times. Yeah, I think I'm going to have
Greenberg.
Yeah, I'm going to have a tough time stabbing myself 20 times. That's what you want to look for, even in a strangulation, is, does it really resonate correctly that the ligature marks match what should happen if I hang myself versus if somebody hung me? Somebody who might hang you and then reconstruct the scene. So a lot of components you need to look at before we absolutely come to a bottom decision, of whether or not she was absolutely murdered. Now, in Noelle's case, I know everything from some of the photographs her mother has shown to what we know in terms of literally she was tied to a tree, and she was tied pretty tightly to that tree. I don't know any of us who would be able to tie ourselves to a tree and tie
No way.
ourselves to a tree.
Absolutely
So,
not.
yeah. So it's those pieces that we need to know more about this for Sandra, to make sure that we're really coming to the right conclusion.
Yes.
Because we don't want to jump to a conclusion and then have to backtrack. It's always awful when we have to backtrack.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, part of this is the fact that this was wrong from the moment of contact at 13. I don't know any states that actually have laws, and we probably should, that you don't get to recruit somebody as an informant at 13 or 16. These are kids who don't understand the consequences of what's going to happen to them or could happen to them being in those circumstances. Because even if it wasn't from an officer, you and I both know it easily could be from somebody they're informing on who retaliates. So putting kids in these dangerous situations is something that shouldn't be happening.
Absolutely not. No. But in the case of Sandra Birchmore, she wasn't in a dangerous situation. She was a police explorer. It was a program for kids who were interested in becoming law enforcement officers. She idolized law enforcement officers.
But she got recruited by an officer to do more. And that's where it crosses the line.
Absolutely. And here he is. This is Matthew Farwell, who groomed her from the age of 13 and had sex with her until she was murdered by him at the age of 23. So he has been arrested. We're waiting for his trial, but there are others involved. They all need to be arrested. His twin brother was involved in also having sex with her. This gentleman right here, we won't call him a gentleman, this disgraced officer who should have never worn a badge. I believe he trained the twins when they came on board when they were in their late 20s. He was their boss, Robert Devine. He needs to be arrested for whatever they can find, because there's no way he hasn't done any. There's just no way he's clean in this. There's just no way. And then this is the school resource officer who claims he had nothing to do with any of it, but admits that he was receiving BJs from her for years, even some in his squad car. He's the school resource officer, mind you, and he was just recently fired not that long ago and went to get a job in another police department where, once his name came out in all of the FBI investigation, he's put on administrative leave and still working, still getting paid. So this case is an absolute, sorry to swear, shit show. It should have never gone on this long. It's despicable. And I will continue to cover it on Social Change Warriors until all four of these men have been just completely arrested and jailed for whatever part they had in Sandra Birchmore or any other victim. There will be more. I have no doubt in my mind there will be more victims in this horrific case in Stoughton, Massachusetts. And then I'm going to continue to give updates, Carol Ann, on what's going on. This is Suzanne Morphew. This is her husband, Barry. He was arrested 2 years ago because there was a lot of evidence that pointed to domestic violence murder. They'd been having a lot of problems in their marriage. All the signs were there. They were arguing over money. They had both had affairs. They were arguing over child support for their teenage daughters. She was writing to her sister that she was afraid of him and that he was escalating in the way he was treating her. Every sign and symptom that you expect to see in a domestic violence household that could escalate to murder was there. Unfortunately, she was missing for a long time. They did not find her body. So when it came down to it, the prosecutor had to release him because they did not feel they could get the conviction. And then what if they went down that road and he was found not guilty, they can't go back, right? So there's double jeopardy. So their logic was, let's release him with prejudice, because then when we do find her body, they had every hope they would. Hopefully we'll have the evidence that we need and we can arrest him again. Right. So they found her body in April, and it was the autopsy was very difficult because unfortunately the poor lady was just bones. So they did do a test of some sort of DNA testing that they can do on the bones, Carol Ann, and they found that she had been injected with some kind of toxic chemicals. Well, lo and behold, once all the tox screens started coming back, it was a toxic type chemical. Well, I say a chemical that was used to put animals to sleep. So not toxic, didn't kill the animal, but put the animal to sleep, but toxic in large amounts, right? So lo and behold, Barry has a gun like this because he's a hunter and they live out in the middle of nowhere in Colorado. And he puts animals to sleep with this gun because he takes their antlers and keeps their antlers. So, what are the odds, right? Lots of other things. They found an empty shell case in the dryer when they searched the house when she was reported missing that had to do with this tranquilizer gun, that was connected to this tranquilizer gun. So it's sketchy. It doesn't make a lot of sense. He still has not been arrested. They obviously don't feel they have enough. But this, in my opinion, and I don't know, I know you need to do more research, but when I get more information on this case, I will bring it back to Social Change Warriors, because I truly believe in my heart of hearts that this is a domestic violence murder and that Suzanne Morphew was murdered by her husband. The other case that we were looking into, which in some ways has been resolved, is rest in peace, Jennifer Farber-Dulos. She was one of the first cases I started following many years ago and was murdered by her husband because he wanted a new life. He wanted a new wife, a new life, and he didn't want to have to pay her child support. So like we were saying, this is a man that was well respected in the community. He was a realtor. He was a coach. By all outward appearances, he was a great dad to the 5 kids that they had together, 2 sets of twins, and then the oldest child. He was a member of the community, on boards of, you name it, he was on it. He was Mr. Personality, handsome. And when things didn't go his way, he killed her. And he involved another business partner of his. He involved his girlfriend, who is now in jail for being an accessory. When they arrested him, when they had enough evidence to arrest him, he was let out on bail. It's like, people, he knows he's going down for this. He knows you have the evidence. He unlived himself, right? Why are we letting these guys out on bail, Carol Ann?
Well, it varies from state to state in terms of, what you can get bail for. But it's my personal opinion that if you're suspected of homicide and we have evidence that we believe you've committed homicide, I'm sorry, you don't get bail.
No way. There's no way. So for instance, when I was on today, I was on your Instagram and I was looking at some of the people you follow, and I came across a friend of yours. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't know if he would want to be mentioned on my show, but I sent him a request to get to know him better and meet him, because his daughter was murdered, and murdered by a fellow police officer who was her on and off boyfriend. I saw that today, another case I was not aware of. And I also saw a case out of Orange County, Florida, not too far from me, 2 more law enforcement officers in a domestic violence situation. And one of them was not apprehended in time and he unlived himself. So now where's the justice, right? How the family doesn't get to see that person arrested, brought to trial. It's horrific. They need, once they have enough, like you said, they're not paying attention to the signs of domestic violence, of the signs that we're building, because most of the time, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Carol Ann, because you're the expert, most of the time it's a slow build. It's not just one day he's a great guy, he's the pillar of the community, great Dan, and boom, the next day you're dead. It's usually a very slow build of abuse.
Yeah. That sort of reminded me, under VOCA, one of the things I was not aware of, VOCA was very instrumental in getting most states to pass the fact that you had the right to do a victim impact statement. And this was up until the early 1990s that you didn't give an impact statement, it wasn't permitted. So the fact that we even now allow families to do impact statements means we've come a long way from where we started.
Yes, absolutely. That's huge, just huge. And now Alan Greenberg, her fiance, has been free as a bird to live his life since 2011. He was never even considered a suspect. Just some random stranger. They want us to believe that if she didn't unalive herself, a random person broke into her house, even though there was no theft. She was not sexually assaulted. Nothing was taken from her home, and just stabbed her 20 times because doesn't she look like somebody who someone would hate and want to stab 20 times?
Yeah, right.
It's ludicrous, right? what they expect us to believe, the people that pull off these ridiculous cover-ups, government was involved in this one for sure, from what I've learned in my research, and police. This person, her fiance, very heavily connected in Pennsylvania government, his family. There's just no way that this should be still ruled an unaliving, and her parents are going back to court. I believe it's in January. So I will have a follow-up live on Ellen Greenberg, because we're not going to forget you, Ellen. We're going to keep fighting for you to have your manner of death reversed to a homicide, which is what exactly happened to you. This is an empty slide because, as I said, I have learned of the police officer in Orange County who is no longer with us. She was unalived, murdered by her police officer boyfriend. We also have learned of the daughter of the gentleman that is on your LinkedIn, who I will get permission before I share his daughter's story. We have learned about her. She was also murdered by her boyfriend, who is also law enforcement. And then we have, this is the newest case that I've come to learn about, thanks to your friend on LinkedIn. I had not seen this one. This is in Orange County, and this is a deputy sheriff murdered by her deputy sheriff boyfriend. And this is where I first saw what we put up earlier, Carol Ann, the homicide by, I have it here somewhere. Yeah, there it is, OIVDV, yeah. And tell our audience again what that stands for.
Well, actually, it's OIDV, just Officer Involved Domestic Violence.
Oh, got it. So get rid of that I there. So OVDV?
OIDV.
Oh, got it.
Get rid of the first V.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I have never seen that acronym before. We did not have that when I was a law enforcement officer. So I'm glad you've taught us a lot tonight. And that was a very important addition, because I did not know about that. I will make sure and get that on my Twitter feed as well. So the blank slide is for the additions that we now have, and I will do more research on their cases and let you know what's happening for justice for these two lovely young ladies, not to mention your friend who also lost his daughter. So I will, if I get his permission, I will share her story. So we'll have to add 2 more slides, sadly and unfortunately. But you can get help, right? We can try. The prevention is there. If we can get you in time, if we can save you from being murdered by your spouse or your loved one, your boyfriend, your ex, we can do that, right? And this is the number is for the domestic violence hotline. So take advantage of it. If you know someone right now, if you even have the glimmer of thought that your friend is in a situation of domestic violence, whether it be psychological or physical, please call this number and see what they can do to help you, to help that person set up a plan. The most dangerous time, Carol Ann, is this not correct, for a woman though, is when she leaves, correct?
Yeah. Yes, the most dangerous time is leaving or attempting to leave, and many victims die within 2 years of having left.
Oh gosh, that just breaks my heart. That just breaks my heart. This is a tough topic to cover every Wednesday, but I feel obligated to cover it. I have known people who have survived domestic violence. I have known people that have not survived domestic violence. So I feel it is my honor to cover this. I am so grateful that I was able to find you on LinkedIn, Carol Ann, and reach back out to you. And thank you. I know you are so busy, and thank you for joining our audience tonight. And for those that will watch on replay, your information tonight was just so valuable to me. And I know that it was to the audience, and I cannot thank you enough. And I hope that you will come back.
Of course. Yes, absolutely. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I just got a couple closing words. You can stay on with me if you'd like, and then we'll go down into the green room together. So I just wanted to thank everybody tonight for joining me. I know this is such a difficult topic, but we have to do it. We have to stand up for the Ellen Greenbergs, for the Suzanne Morphews, for the Jennifer Doulos, and for the Sandra Birchmores of the world, because there's so many of them. And we're hoping through prevention and education of young children, high school children, before they get too old, that we can make that happen. We can bring those numbers down, because the numbers are just too high, and they're just horrific. So thank you so much, everyone. Tomorrow night, I'll be back with Calling Out Corruption. I have an amazing guest. He is an advocate. He is a very politically involved. He has done a ton of research on Project 2025. So whether you're a Republican, Green Party, Democrat, Independent, please come, because he has spent time and he's bringing the facts. Okay, he's not just going to give you, like they say, fake news. He's not fake news. He spends a ton of time doing research. I think you'll enjoy him, and he's joining us tomorrow night. Next Wednesday, we are going to go off the domestic violence a little bit. We'll always honor the ladies, but we're actually going to go back to the Karen Reed trial, and we're going to dissect the testimony of Jessica Hyde. It was very interesting testimony, very important for the defense. And we will have our special guest joining us next week, Auntie Deb. She's going to bring the tea. So I hope you'll join me next Wednesday with Auntie Deb, and tomorrow night with our special guest, who I will introduce when he joins us. And then next Thursday, I have another guest already lined up who I think you're going to really enjoy meeting. And he is a former FBI agent and has a ton of information on a new corruption case that is breaking as we speak in the state of Indiana. So thank you again to Carol Ann. Thank you to everybody that came. Thank you to my dear friend Kathy. She comes every Wednesday supporting my tiny little channel, trying to get noticed and trying to spread the word about everybody that needs help, and injustice is everywhere, and we have to stop it out. We have to get together and raise our voice. That's our hashtag, just us. My mother always told me that it's just us, and that's what it's like in the world. We have to come together as a community. We have to be a village, because that's the way we get things done. Right, Carol Ann?
That's it.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow night and again next week. Social Change Warriors out. Peace, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Good night.